We're using a version of DLSS available for Nintendo Switch 2 hardware, powered by Nvidia's Tensor cores. Hello again, I am Blunty, and so comes the quote from CDPR's PR people when Digital Foundry asked them for some clarifications around the what, how, and why of Cyberpunk 2077 on the Nintendo Switch 2. The game utilises DLSS in all four modes, in handheld and docked, and in the performance and quality variations of each. Which, for those keeping score, means I was, indeed, once again correct. A couple of weeks ago, when I was toying with the idea of Monster Hunter Wilds being on Switch 2, I used Cyberpunk 2077's Switch 2 port as a comparison point for performance and presentation while trying to match it on a handheld PC to get a vague power profile and settings target for roughly simulating what Wilds itself might look like on a Switch 2 port. Which, as a reminder, at the time, CDPR was absolutely silent on this stuff, and Nintendo themselves, to this day, haven't even said the word DLSS. And because directly quoting myself feels a bit weird, I'm just going to play you the clip of what I said. It seems maybe obvious that the Switch 2 version is probably rendering internally below 720p. It is noticeably softer, but it is also a lot cleaner of aliasing, so I'm thinking that's maybe 720p using DLSS to pop up to 1080p, which would mean DLSS in quality mode. But I think it's probably more likely balanced or performance mode DLSS for a 626p or even a 540p internal render upscale to 1080p after all. That was a couple of weeks ago, flash forward to today, and now we know, again through Eurogamer's Digital Foundry team, who've been under fire a bit recently from a lot of people in the community and content creator stuff, including, me. I threw some shade at them as well because of their opinions about how you should be comparing the Switch 2 to a PlayStation 4, which I think is silly. And if you would like to know why I think that was silly, I'll link a video for you in the down below. But relevant to today's video, through them, we now know that I eyeballed the upscaling right on the money. Again, quoting CDPR's PR people, we now know for sure that scaling can range from 2x and up per axis, which is indeed performance mode, exactly as I predicted, and up from that, you get balanced mode, which gives you a 1.7 upscale, and quality mode, which is a 1.5x upscale. So in terms of resolutions, that means we're talking about the DLSS upscaler being fed in a native render of anything ranging from 540p at the low end to just under 640p in the middle and 720p at the top end, all upscaled to a 1080p output, all to either 30 FPS in the quality mode or 40 FPS in the performance mode. Which again, I want to restate for the record, I am strongly recommending you go for the performance mode. The difference in feel for this game in particular from 30 to 40, for those of you who don't game on PC and perhaps have only ever commonly played at either 30 FPS or 60 FPS, the relatively smaller jump to 40 FPS might surprise you. Sure, on paper it's only 10 FPS extra, but please trust me on this, and you don't even have to trust me, just try it out even when you get the game on Switch 2. It feels very significant, which is why it's always been my baseline target for FPS when pushing Cyberpunk on lower tier hardware, like my handheld gaming PC, the ROG Ally. But we also now have more information for handheld performance mode too, something that was a bit thin on the ground before now, and something I really didn't approach in my previous videos on Cyberpunk Switch 2 port because real information was a bit thin on the ground, and decent quality footage of it being played in handheld was also what you might call rare. But we now know in handheld mode they are targeting a 720p output, flat upscaled to the 1080p screen, of course. And again, as someone who has used the ROG Ally since launch, which has a very similarly sized screen, also at 1080p native resolution, you might be surprised how many crimes are hidden by 720p on a 1080p screen at under 8 inches in size. So I'm not terribly concerned by that. It should look just fine. But in context of the upscaling, that now does mean the 2x and above upscaling we're talking about can be pulling up from as low as 360p. And you guessed it, I've also done that on the ROG Ally before with Cyberpunk. Now, with the ROG Ally, it's all AMD hardware, so I'm upscaling with FSR 2.0 or 3.0 in later updates on that, which are just frankly worse at upscaling than DLSS is, so it should be even better on the Switch when we're upscaling from 360p. So 360p, upscaled to 720p, and then presented on a 1080p screen of 7.9 inches, really is at the absolute lower edge of what I would want to see from any game on the Switch 2, and certainly something as visually dense as Cyberpunk. However, in another previous video, I did also show the Deck Wizard footage, which is one of the best examples of handheld footage to come out of those preview days, and even on the unfinished game code that was being used, and with the camera slightly out of focus at times, and with the softly shaky handheld gameplay, which I have cropped and stabilized here, but it did indeed look better than I might have expected. And a fair chunk of that probably is down to how much better DLSS is than FSR2 or FSR3. But now at least we have this as solid information, because Nintendo still haven't mentioned Nvidia's DLSS at all, anywhere, although Nvidia themselves have, in their own blog post, where we also got the first official confirmation that the Switch 2 hardware does, as anyone with some technology of the architecture in play already assumed it would, include Nvidia's Tensor cores, which is the hardware components in their PC GPUs that are specifically designed to accelerate machine learning related tasks like DLSS. So now we have a second confirmation of that, of course, through CDPR. You know what else those machine learning cores are related to? Ray tracing. We don't know how many of the cores the Switch 2 has yet, but the ROG Ally has just 12 of AMD's equivalent cores, and it can do ray tracing, sometimes surprisingly well. That said, I would be very shocked if Cyberpunk on the Switch 2 used any ray tracing at all. I would expect the DLSS will be needing all of that silicon it can get its hands on. But yeah, we still don't know what flavor of DLSS is in play here. It seems clear that it's not the DLSS 4.0 flavor with its new transformer model for upscaling, but instead the CNN model, or convolutional neural network model. But not even these new quotes from CDPR seem to lock us in on a specific version. My guess was DLSS 3.0, which seemed the best fit for the generation of Nvidia GPU architecture we know is cooked into the Switch 2's customized chip, but it's just been called a version of DLSS available for Nintendo Switch 2 hardware by the CDPR PR peeps. So that could mean there's some kind of customized DLSS implementation that Nintendo and Nvidia have both worked on together for the specific needs of this device and what Nintendo wanted to do. Or it could just mean Nintendo are, as they so often are, just being very deliberately squirrely and obtusely vague about their finer technical details of the hardware. Don't know if you've noticed this, but they don't like to talk about that stuff. Still, I'm glad I was right about what's going on with Cyberpunk. It's nice to be vindicated like that. And not the first and only time I've been right about the Switch 2 port of this game. I predicted its arrival before announcement when no one else was. I nailed down the scaling range in my rough side-by-side, and I reserve the right to be mildly smug about all that. End of day though, as much fun as it is, and as interesting as the tech stuff can be to talk about and dissect, I do actually kind of side with Nintendo's attitude around it, generally speaking, meaning so long as the game is a fun experience, it really doesn't actually matter too much. DLSS 2.0, 3.0, some sort of hybrid customization thing going on, it doesn't matter. Does the game run well? Does it play well? Is it fun? That's all that really matters at the end of the day. Still not going to stop me from conjecturing and discussing and dissecting in the future, but I'm just saying, end of day, is the game fun? That's all that really matters, right? So there you go. Hopefully you found this as interesting as I did, because I do. Thanks for watching. I'm Blunty. Thank you as always to the patrons. I will catch you next time.